Okey-doke. Well, welcome everybody to June's podcast, and we're out here on a kind of blustery, doesn't really feel like summer's day, out on Drumbrough Moss, and I'm joined today by David Clarke and Jack Dryden. And if you'd both like to introduce yourselves, Jack?
Hello everyone, I'm Jack, Assistant Reserves Officer, working in the north of the county for Cumbria Wildlife Trust. And I have actually just seen a dragonfly fly past, so that's a pretty good sign for the podcast.
And David?
Hi, I'm David Clarke. I'm County Dragonfly Recorder, but I'm also here because I've been instrumental in white-faced darter introductions now for almost longer than I care to admit.
Absolutely brilliant. And Liz has been out already to do an interview with David and some of the volunteers when you were doing some of the white-faced darter monitoring. So we're going to go straight into that interview and you'll get a flavour of what happens in the white-faced darter monitoring on the ground.
Good morning, David. So we've just walked a mile or so from the car park and we're deep in the bog at Drumbrough. Can you tell me a little bit about the creature we've come to find?
Right, well, it's the white-faced darter dragonfly, which in terms of its English distribution is extremely uncommon. It's only got 6 sites altogether in the whole of England, and 3 of those are now in Cumbria. It's quite a small dragonfly, but it's very handsome. Its male is black and red, the female is black and yellow, and it's got little dark wing bases. It's a very distinctive creature. A lot of dragonflies are very, very mobile. They fly long distances, and distribute themselves very well. But white-faced darter doesn't normally do that. It stays around its habitats and doesn't so often cross into land outside the habitat. Which is why particularly we are doing introduction work, because we do the carrying.
But tell me a little bit then about the white-faced darters at Drumbrough itself.
Yeah, well, it was a follow-on to the Fowlshaw work, really. The warden at the time here spotted the opportunity, and he ensured we had some nice deep pools dug into solid peat, and that's important because it maintains acid water. And he had these pools dug in 2012. And it was about another 5 years before we deemed they would mature enough, because they had other dragonflies breeding in them by then and all the rest of it, because the larvae feed on small aquatic life, and all that had to develop in the new pools. So that happened, and then we started introductions in 2018. So in the end of the day, we actually finished doing introductions last year. But what we have to do now is prove the results of our work. And that's what we're here today mainly to do. And this is actually the hardest part of the job, is working out what's happened.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds a Herculean task to me.
Well, it's almost as bad. I mean, you can't count dragonflies flying around. It just doesn't work. But the beauty is, the larvae spend 2 years developing in water. And when they finally emerge for the first time ever, they leave a little skin behind on the vegetation near the water's edge. It's those skins, we call them exuvii, which just means cast-offs. We come here today to collect those, because that's our means of counting the minimum number of individuals that have emerged on site. And we have to do that for roughly 6 weeks in succession to make sure that we get all the emergence we can. And we carry them away in pots. So I take them back home, I count them, we put them on spreadsheets, and there is our evidence of what our introduction project has achieved.
That's so painstaking.
It is, and you see today people going around on their hands and knees. It's back-breaking work, I have to say, and it could take us half an hour to go around each pool in turn, and there are 6 of them, and go away with all the pots.
And you were telling me a little bit about the white-faced darter itself, and what's special about this little dragonfly.
Yeah, well, it's a northern species, so the bulk of its UK range is in northwest Scotland, and in Europe it goes right up beyond the Arctic Circle. Wow. And if you go to the bogs of Lithuania or somewhere like that, it's extremely common, whereas here it's a national rarity.
And tell me a bit about its life cycle.
Right, well, round about now, when the adults have emerged, they will mate and immediately start egg laying, and they lay into floating sphagnum moss. But those eggs will hatch into tiny, tiny larvae in about a fortnight or so. And then after that they go through at least a dozen molts over 2 years to reach full size. So they emerge then at the time of year we're now making this programme, which is late May, and they are on the wing for about 6 to 8 weeks if they're lucky, depending on the weather. So that's the cycle.
So just 6 to 8 weeks and then they die?
That's it. Well, it's typical of most dragonflies that about 95% of their life cycle is not a flying insect. It's living in water. Totally different sort of animal combined. You've got an aerial being and an aquatic being combined very successfully in one, and it works.
It's extraordinary.
It is. And particularly the difference between the larva, which is a little dull-coloured thing with hardly any markings and looks quite tiny, and it swims around and it catches prey underwater, and eventually it develops wings, and until it actually comes out of water it can't expand them, and expands its body too. In fact, the dragonfly, once it's come out of its skin, is more than twice the size of the skin it was packed inside, and it's always quite difficult to reconcile the living flying insect with the larva.
A bit of sort of insect origami, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it happens in many insects, but with dragonflies it's particularly spectacular because of the fact that the difference between the larva and the adult. Yeah, a bit like a caterpillar and the butterfly really. It's that sort of level of difference.
So David, it's quite busy here.
It is busy. We can hear people. We can occasionally hear a cuckoo as well, which is very nice. But no, the people are chatting away because they're describing what they're finding. And several of our volunteers have been here before, which is good because they've learnt a lot.
So tell me a bit about the volunteers and how integral they have been to this whole reintroduction project.
Well, I would say completely, because this is the hard work stage. Really, is getting the evidence. You can't count dragonflies. Adult dragonflies flying around, it's a complete waste of time, but you can count skins that they leave behind when they emerge, and that's very effective. But you need people on the ground to do that once a week for 6 weeks, around 6 pools. It's a lot of individual effort.
And there's 7 or 8 people here today, aren't there?
At least, yes, which is better than some days, but we've got the weather for it. We hope the emergence that's happened in the last few days, where the weather's been very good, has made up for a long period of really poor weather in April and early May, which was beginning to get worrying because we hadn't collected all that many skins up until today.
OK, well David, maybe you could
take
me over and I could meet some of the volunteers.
Carefully, we'll meet.
Yeah.
Do you know, have they headed that way? I think they have. I can see a few. Right.
So we've just caught up with Michael and the volunteers. Michael, tell me what you do.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm a seasonal reserves assistant for the Northern Reserves and the Cumbria Wildlife Trust.
And you're going to show me one of the white-faced darters emerging.
So here we're looking at a white-faced darter emerger, which means it's crawled out of the bog onto a piece of vegetation and has come out of its larval skin. And at the moment it's currently basking in the sun, allowing its exoskeleton to harden a bit, and eventually it will open its wings wide enough and will fly off.
So where is where is the skin that it's shed?
So the skin that it's shed is just above it. You can see.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's the so compared to its adult size, its larval skin looks quite small.
So how long will this emerging darter stay on this piece of vegetation?
Well, the full process of them emerging can take a few hours, and even at this stage where it looks like it's almost ready, it can just sit there for an hour or two, just letting itself bask in the sun and harden its exoskeleton a bit.
That's fantastic. We'll leave it to get on with its emerging. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
So we've just caught up with the volunteers at one of the ponds, and I'm going to ask one of them why you would spend a glorious sunny day, which is quite a Cumbria rarity, in a peat bog.
Yeah, my name is Martin Keeler, and I've actually been doing this for the last 3 or 4 years, and basically I've always had a strong love of nature, and discovered these amazing mosses, they call them here, the bogs, out on the Solway Plains, and I just love coming to these places. And then I heard about this project about the white-faced darters, trying to establish them in new areas because they've become so low in numbers. So I wanted to get involved with that.
So what's special, Martin, about coming to the mosses here?
Basically, you hardly meet any other person. You know, there's walkways where you can go, and the bird life you can hear and see as well. And actually, it was also the butterflies and moths were my original main interest. And there's a lot to find, actually, you know, in these mosses. They're just such big, wide, open spaces, and hardly anybody around. I just love being in these spaces on a good day. I mean, it's usually butterflies I'm after. I tend to come on days when the sun's shining, at least.
Yes. Yes, it might be a different story in the winter. So could you tell me a little bit then about what you're doing down on your hands and knees at the side of the bog there?
Well, along with most of us, we actually get down on our hands and knees at the edge of the pools, making sure it's safe, and then actually just investigating the vegetation that's growing out from the pools or just on the bank close by, and to find the skins that these white-faced darter dragonflies leave behind. But they're quite fragile. You have to be careful they don't get blown away, so you have to keep them safe in your hand until you can put them in a pot.
You've got a little jar there with some inside. How many have you got there then?
I think there's actually only about five in there from this pool. 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5.
And they do look immensely fragile.
They are, yes. One of them was in one piece when I was starting to get it up, but there was just no way you could get it off the vegetation without using a little bit of force, and so there's 2 halves of one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah, they're quite distinctive, actually, with the colour, these stripes you see on the abdomen.
Well, thanks for showing me those, Martin, and good luck with the rest of the day. And on this gorgeous warm day after the cold weather that we've had, I think we're expecting a record-breaking haul.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah, of course it's a bit windy, so we have to be careful we don't lose them in this breeze.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, so I've just come back to see how David's getting on and how he thinks today's going.
I'm happy to say it's looking quite good. I was hoping for at least 25 exuvii per pool. That's like 150 for the site. I would say we'll probably reach that fairly easily, so that will be good news. And also we've seen several adults on the wing over the pools, and we've seen other dragonflies around the pools, which has been just a nice, pleasant experience.
Tell me what other ones you've seen this morning.
The big, heavily built one is a 4-spotted chaser, and that's quite a common dragonfly, particularly marshy areas and bog pools and all sorts of habitat, really. And a couple of species of damselfly, large red damselfly, azure blue damselfly, common blue damselfly. So this is still spring, really. And other species come out in summer and go through into the autumn, and the early ones gradually disappear.
And you get the task of counting them?
I do, yes. I don't mind that. It's a reward. It shows you the final result, and I can then put it on paper on the spreadsheets, and that all goes into the Trust's evidence database, and that completes the cycle, really.
Absolutely, and it gives you evidence of how well the project is doing.
Yes, and we expect it to vary, because all insect life varies in numbers. Some years are going to be better than others. We know that, but the more years we've got data for, the more confidence you've got in the sort of levels that are being achieved.
Okay, well, David, thanks very much for your time today. I'll leave you to continue the hunt, and then embark on the job of counting them all and finding out where we're up to.
We'll report back on that in due course. Yep.
Right, so what a brilliant interview from Liz there out in the field with the volunteers. And what I wanted to do for the rest of the podcast is kind of have a bit of a deep dive into dragonflies in Cumbria, dragonflies on our nature reserves, and then the kind of things that we've been doing at Cumbria Wildlife Trust for their conservation. So, David, if you can, it's just started to rain, I can't believe it. If you can, give us a quick précis of what dragonflies are.
Right, well, they've always fascinated me because they're a very ancient insect, really. You can see fossils of them that are 200 million years old, for example. So they have a primitive look about them, but they're very advanced insects too, because they're highly adapted to two different ways of life. They live in water as larvae for the bulk of their lives normally, and then for a very short period they're wonderful flying insects that are highly tuned and can chase and catch midges and other insects on the wing. So they are very, very fascinating insects.
This part has always absolutely fascinated me. If you think about a dragonfly that can live for 5 years in a pool, come out for 3 weeks, or if
right.
that,
Yeah.
and then that's the end of its life. So the immature phase lasts so much longer.
It does, and in terms of conservation, it's caring and catering for the presence of larvae in pools and streams that we need to be thinking about almost more than the adult insect.
Absolutely. We're going to have to stop.
I think so. You only have to go inside.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, it's fine.
I'm apologising, it's not my fault.
It's not your fault.
Well, having said it was blustery and sunny, we've had to retreat into the hide because it just started to pour down. So we'll carry on in here. It's going to sound a little bit different. So we were talking about the life cycles of these dragonflies. There's two main types, is that right?
In terms of this country, the species that emerge quite early in the sort of May time, which we often call them spring species, and they have often a big emergence in a very short period of time, like 2 or 3 weeks, and they all come out. And the white-faced darter is a good example of that. Other species, which we call summer species, they have a much longer emergence season. It starts late spring, but then perhaps goes through into late summer.
I was kind of thinking in terms of what we call damselflies and dragonflies. Well, they're different morphologically, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And generally speaking, damselflies are smaller, weaker-looking species. Yeah, they have different shaped wings, but they have the same life cycle, broadly the same feeding habits, catching and feeding on flying insects normally, but much smaller ones, obviously. One group of damselflies, they call them demoiselles, look a bit more like butterflies. They have much broader wings and much more leisurely form of flight, shall we say. And they're really, really attractive because they have almost tropical colours. And fortunately, they're not that uncommon in Cumbria, which is really nice.
Are they all predatory in the larval phase in the water then?
They're predatory as larvae and they're predatory as adults. Right. Bigger dragonflies will eat smaller dragonflies and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, they're purely always predatory. Yeah.
One of the striking things is the colour of these things, because they're often incredibly beautifully coloured, aren't they?
Yes, well, I just mentioned the demoiselles, and that's probably the ultimate example. But others like downy emerald, which have metallic colours, or you get lovely combinations of black and blue and yellow on the body. The wings normally are not colourful, apart from these demoiselles that I mentioned.
We were talking just before we started recording about how the dragonflies, or lots of species, can tolerate quite acidic conditions in the pools. Is there a general kind of best places to look for dragonflies?
Acidity is very good because it deters a lot of predatory species, and particularly fish, for example, that live in fresh waters. I would say lack of pollution is even more important in pools that have...
So water quality?
Water quality, yes, haven't got runoff from agriculture, aren't too disturbed by people, and have a good gradation of vegetation by the waterside. That's often important too, and lack of tree shade. Not many dragonflies like places that are heavily tree shaded.
Yeah. So, in the big water bodies, do we still get dragonflies in those?
Depends very much on the margins, really. And big water bodies have troubles that smaller ones don't. They're much more prone to wind or even wave action, depending on how big they are. Dragonflies don't like that. They like to be able to fly in good settled conditions, so sheltered situations are much better for them, and those aren't normally the case with big water bodies.
They need to have calm conditions to emerge in as well, don't they?
Particularly to emerge, they're very vulnerable because they have a period when the wings and the body need to be expanded, and if that is disturbed by huge gusts of wings, emerging wings may wrap around the plants, and that's it.
I'm sure the changing climate and some of this crazy summer weather we get at the moment doesn't help.
No, I'm quite concerned about it. It has been quite a windy season as well as not a very warm one.
And they need the warmth as well, don't they?
They do really, yes, because they don't like to fly much when it's cold, whether other insects aren't flying, because if they've got to hunt flying insects, the prey's got to be on the wing first of all anyway. So that's their natural inclination, is to choose the warmest part of the day to chase their prey, and to chase, in the case of males, looking for females, obviously, and it's the mating season, yeah.
And we seem to create all the habitat then, don't we, by digging pools?
Yeah, we've dug all the holes, really, and on the whole, particularly for white-faced darters, which need deep pools that will survive our increasingly variable and often drought conditions, which are a big worry for all dragonflies.
You mentioned climate change there, and obviously climate change is really important for a species like dragonflies. I mean, we are gaining species, aren't we, as well as potentially losing species here in Cumbria because of climate change.
Since about 1990, we've gained five species.
5 breeding species.
5 breeding species, yeah, and we haven't lost any, which is the other good news.
Oh, really?
Not yet,
Right.
but I mean, who knows? I mean, if we're talking hundreds of years ahead, we can expect more species to come in from more southern parts of Europe, as they are already in southern Britain anyway. Yeah. We don't know how the climate's going to go and what factors really are that make it able to survive in a particular location. All these things are going to gradually change.
And prey items, the way climate changes.
Prey may change, that's absolutely, yeah. And predators may change.
Yeah, well,
all those hobbies.
Hobbies, yeah. I was going to say, because suddenly there's hobbies all over the place in North Lancs and in South Cumbria, and they're a great predator.
They're a dragonfly predator.
Yeah.
I think on the whole, they tend to, at the moment, they arrive a little bit later, and they're breeding a little bit later than the main season particularly for white-faced darters. So, and they don't focus on a particular species anyway. They catch any dragonfly they can.
Yeah. Just on the climate change thing again, David. Was it last year or the year before, we had a Norfolk hawker identified at Foulshore, which had obviously come up from down south. Now, as far as I understand, that's a species that has spread massively from its original place in Norfolk.
That's absolutely correct. It's now breeding in Lancashire, so that's a very short hop really to Foulshore. But it's a species which is a good example of how it suddenly changed from being a national protected rarity to becoming, well, it's gone off the rarities list, responding to presumably climate.
And I suppose we could then get Norfolk hawker breeding in Cumbria in the future.
I don't see why not, and we will no doubt get several species that we haven't even thought about, which are currently spreading elsewhere in England.
Right.
And often they spread north on the east coast further than they do in the west, and then they gradually come across.
Right.
So we should be looking out for both dragonflies and damselflies, which are unheard of in the county, suddenly starting to take up here.
Brilliant, fantastic. What are the highlights then in terms of Cumbria Wildlife Trust nature reserves for seeing dragonflies and damselflies?
Well, the two big peatland areas are certainly highlights here at Drumbrough and down at Foulshore Moss, because they are extensive areas of peatland as well, with lots of water and lots of natural or very near natural habitat. So we get all the peatland species. Foulshore is probably a little bit more varied, and it's also got let's say, a more tolerant climate on the edge of Morecambe Bay than we have up here on the Solway. So, and that supports, I would guess, 15 breeding species, which is very good number and a very good range, including species like downy emerald now and brown hawker, which turn up regularly, as well as the more normal peat bog species. So, and we have barkbooth lots, for example, which again is in the south of the county, and it's surrounded by some of the other lakeland sites, which support a wider range of species than we get in North Cumbria. So you have some very good sites both in the north and the south of the county.
Right, let's go back to white-faced darter then. And you were out with the volunteers the other day. How was the count? How many did you get?
Count was good. We got well over 300, which took the year count to just over 400 skins that we collected. So we expected that because it should have been the peak of the emergence season, and we haven't finished yet. So we're going to be collecting more this week. Last year we got nearly 700, I think it was, Jack, was it? Is that right?
Yeah, it was about that, just under.
Just under 700, which is our measure of the population here, but it's increasingly not a measure, because what's happened is it's now in pools which are about half a mile from our little group of 6 introduction pools. It's taken up in anywhere that's suitable, even though it's not a lot of dragonflies are very dispersive. They can travel long distances. White-faced darter doesn't do that, which is partly why we're doing what we're doing. We're giving it a helping hand, but it's getting on with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've now got 3 populations, whereas before we only had the 1, and 2 of those are Wildlife Trust populations.
Well, we were at the cutting edge, aren't we? We are at the cutting edge, obviously with your help and the help of the British Dragonfly Society.
Well, that's right. That's how it all began. As no one, as far as we knew at the time, had ever done this with this species ever. So we were the first, and we've now done 2 projects that have worked, and now RSPB is doing one not far away from here. So if that works as well, that'll be a 3rd.
Fantastic. Jack, you've been organising these volunteer monitoring schemes for quite a while now, haven't you?
We monitor each of the 6 pools by going along the edge, being careful not to actually disturb anything that's in the process of emergence. We go along the edges of the pools. They're quite like corners, don't they? That's where we find a lot of them emerging. Whether there's a nice little niche microclimate there. I always go straight for the corners because I'm quite competitive. And then we put them in our high-tech milk cartons, don't we? Because they're like paper. They can, if it's even just a slight breeze, they blow out of your hand. And if you try and hold them too tight, you just crush them, and then David can't identify them. So we put them in milk cartons and pop the lid on, and that keeps them safe. Mm-hmm. And then, David takes them away. We keep a count for each pool, so we've got an idea of what numbers are like. Because in the early days, that was quite important because we'd only put them in 2 pools.
Now they're in 6.
Yeah, and the reason why that was important was because we could track them slowly spreading to other pools, and then that suggested that they were doing their own breeding on site, because we hadn't put them in there ourselves.
And we've created a lot of pools in the restoration phase, as we do on these mosses. I mean, we can see out the window, it's full of little pools.
It's artificial, and it's whether it will last, and I think there will come a point where we have to think quite carefully as to what we want to do for the population, because we do like the kind of natural processes approach to things at the Wildlife Trust, but you do have to be interventionist at times.
Well, the natural process is that all the pools will eventually fill in. Yeah. So the only option then is to make more.
Jack, give us a little flavour of what a white-faced darter reintroduction is, the kind of nuts and bolts.
Yeah. It's a fancy word, isn't it? Translocation, but I soon discovered it's not quite a fancy process.
Involves a bucket.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it beforehand. All the correct paperwork has to be in order. But in terms of actually moving the species, well, we did 2 things, didn't we? We'd go before the dragonflies actually start emerging, so a few weeks before. It's usually kind of early May, late April, isn't it? And we go to the donor site, and by hand with a net we'd fish out mature larvae that were going to emerge that year, and we'd collect 100 of those, bring them to the pool that we wanted to put them in at Drumrough, pop them in here. So that was one thing we did. And we started to kind of drift away from that as the project went on, and we diverted to solely collecting the sphagnum moss, which floats along the surface of the donor site's pools, because that's where the dragonflies lay their eggs. The eggs are coated in kind of a gelatinous gel, sticky, so they stick into the sphagnum moss. You know they're there, and you also know you're probably going to get a few really microscopic larvae in there as well. So we just fish that up, pop it in a bucket with water, very carefully carry it off the bog, which for anyone that's ever walked on a bog, yeah, you want a lid on that bucket because you trip all the time. Yep. And yeah, drive it here as quick as we could really. It's not too far away. It's only about 30 minutes. Again, same process here, walking out to the pools, and you literally just pour it in the water, and that is it.
I absolutely love it. You know, like we did a podcast about pine martin reintroduction the other week, and that's a complicated beast, catching them in Scotland and driving them down here. Yeah. But this idea of getting a bucket of sphagnum, bringing it over here and putting it in the pools is just superb. I mean, in all seriousness, we do have to be careful whenever moving freshwater plants, especially freshwater aquatic plants, from one place to another. You absolutely have to make sure that you don't have any invasive species in, and obviously, you know, we would be very careful doing that. But so if you're listening, don't start dumping buckets of water from one pond to another. It's not always good. Right, that's fantastic. They're just such fascinating beasts, and I always beat myself up about not getting more into them and learning more about them and going out watching them over the summer, because especially if you're into birds, and the bird season gets a bit dull once everything's, you know, got their chicks out and everything stops singing. So that's the time to turn your attention to dragonflies. And like David said, we've got some brilliant reserves where you can see 15, 16 species in one place. At Barkbooth, I used to do the butterfly transect at Barkbooth, and it goes past the pond. And that idea of just taking a deck chair out to the edge of the pond and sitting and watching them interact, because they're absolutely fascinating, aren't they? This kind of this dance that goes on, you know, the big ones chasing the little ones and all the rest of it, and their behaviour. So if you get the chance and we get some half decent weather, get out there and look for some dragonflies. There's some brilliant guidebooks at the moment for dragonflies, and
if you are going out recording dragonflies, the most important thing to do is to make sure you register your record either on one of the online programs like iRecord or iNaturalist, because I will get to see those records and I have to verify them.
Specifically, Jack, what are the highlights here? Because like David said, we get a lot of species here, as well as this important white-faced darter.
Yeah, I mean, Drumrough is a really good place for coming to see dragonflies. The path is circular and it passes ponds on both ends. If you come on a sunny day, you're going to hear dragonflies' wings beating, and you're going to see them fighting each other. You're going to see them mating, you're going to see them egg laying. It changes throughout the season what you see. If you come earlier in the season, kind of May time into June, there's hordes of four-spotted chasers, which are really aggressive little beasts that you can hear having dog fights, and you can see them having dog fights over the ponds. They're quite frantic little beasts and quite fun to watch. And as I say, the path's right next to the ponds, so they're a good one to see. And obviously you've now got the chance to potentially see white-faced darters, which is a very rare sight still in England. Hordes of damselflies as well. I quite like the emerald damselflies. I think they've done studies on like their aquatic life cycle, and they're quite aggressive little creatures when they live in the ponds as well. They've got a really quick kind of growth period, and they're one of the few dragonflies that actually actively hunt prey. They don't just ambush them. That's right. They're mad little creatures. And then we also get emperors as well, which they're lovely to see because they come in quite high and kind of dominate the pools.
They're huge as well. I mean,
yeah. You can see them from quite far away. And then towards summer, once the white-faced darters are finished, we get masses and masses of black darter, which I think David was just saying they're kind of struggling nationally, but at Drumrough we get plenty of them here, and they're quite smart-looking little creatures as well.
We don't actually do any specific management, do we, for dragonflies?
No, most of the ponds that they're found in are from the restoration work, so the creation of bunded cells to try and restore the peatland. In terms of active management, no, we just let them do the thing and monitor them every now and then.
Real. And it would be, I suppose it would be digging new pools rather than digging out old pools because of what's already within the pools.
Yeah, I think naturally letting them spread is the idea, isn't it? I think the less we have to do, the better, isn't it? If we pop a pond in, let them find their own way there.
The pond creation thing is quite phenomenal, isn't it? You know, like if you've got a piece of habitat that isn't really particularly good, and obviously you don't want to destroy important wetlands to make ponds, but you put a pond in, and it suddenly fills up with life, doesn't it? You know, it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah. But I mean, like Joe says, though, like ponds are fantastic if you put them in the right place, and they're great for engaging people as well, because often we walk through the countryside and to be fair, we don't see much, but you go and sit by a pond for 10 minutes and you'll be surprised how much you see.
Brill. So, building a pond in your garden is a great idea. Attracts the wildlife in. I'm going to build one in my garden actually, because I've got a massive trampoline that hasn't been used for ages and is just rusting away. Now my children have left, so I'm going to get rid of it and I'm going to put a pond in, and hopefully that's going to fill up and I'm going to be able to watch the dragonflies in my garden in the middle of Lancaster. Brill, that's fantastic. What a great thing. I'd just like to thank Jack so much for giving us your insight into how all this monitoring works and shepherding all those volunteers in and out on the bog and not losing any in the pools. That's great. And David, thanks so much. Such a great knowledge of the subject and so fascinating. And as always, I'd like to thank Liz behind the microphone and doing the wonderful interviews with the volunteers out on site. Brilliant. So we'll speak to you all next month. Thanks. Bye.